I wanted to make a video about the final boss of Unrealized Realities, but wasn't able to make a clear for it that I liked. Long story short, I think it's a terrible boss fight with many problems. I'm primarily going to talk about only one of them here though, since it relates somewhat to the near light mechanic. Arknights can get pretty complex, and as we go further along the life of Arknights, and as more and more events come out, event mechanics naturally get more and more complex. There just aren't that many simple and viable mechanics you can still add that would feel novel. They've mostly been done. But as events get more and more complex, Hypergriff risks making stages and events that are too complex and incomprehensible to the average player. This can result in stages that feel overwhelming and unfun. One way to counteract this is by adding restrictions. For example, if you're doing a 1,000-piece puzzle, people would probably think you were a madman if you just picked up a piece and then started checking the other 999 pieces to see which 4 slot into it. Most people will start with the edge pieces. They're pretty easy to find and significantly reduce the number of starting combinations you need to investigate. Once you have the edges done, your scope starts expanding, though you'll still use other restrictions to reduce complexity. For example, maybe looking for only pieces with a particular color or pattern. Arknights puts this into great effect in many of their event mechanics. We have strict restrictions, like the Chapter 16 smoke generator mechanic, the Babel chain mechanic, or in this case, the near light vision mechanic. We also have softer versions of this, like the towers in Twilight of Volumond, or the heaters in Break the Ice. We even have a couple weird ones, like the boss of The Masses Travels, which gradually reveals the stage as you defeat each phase of the boss. All of these serve to both restrict and guide the player. It gives room for Hypergriff to make complex stages, but then tell the player, ignore those guys in the corner for now. Start over here. The final boss in Unrealized Realities is pretty much the opposite. It starts with great freedom. You could argue that the flying drones that do burn damage restrict you a bit, but really it isn't a major factor in the grand scheme of things. As the fight progresses, the map space actually becomes more restrictive. First, you lose your ground tiles. You also lose the ability to lower platforms, which are the primary counter to the annoying trees. And then, as the flying drones start closing in and you're forced to start taking them down, you lose more and more real estate. To be clear, the boss putting some restrictions on your ability to fight them is normal and fine. Where I think Unrealized Realities goes wrong is both the extent of the tile bans and the fact that the tile restriction mechanic isn't directly tied to the boss themselves. The other most extreme cases of these that I can think of are Frost Nova and the Steam Knight. Putting aside the fact that I also think the Frost Nova fight is quite poor, in those cases, not only do their tile bans not directly negate their event's core mechanics, but once the boss is defeated, you're not at risk of losing more tiles. So why did Hypergriff choose to make the boss fight for Unrealized Realities the way they did? I can think of 2 reasons. The first is that they designed this with the intent of making it an anti-stalling mechanic. The pieces are there, but ultimately they did it in a very roundabout way, and technically the boss is still infinitely stallable with a defender and medic. They could have done anti-stalling a lot more simply with just some smaller platforms and repositioning some of the balloons. The only other reason I can think of is that they wanted the boss fight to match the story, which I'm actually pretty cool with. I'm always a sucker for when the story can be told or enhanced through gameplay or environments. A more cynical person might say that the destruction of Propeller Paradise was already in the story and the boss fight doesn't really add to it, but I'll take what I can get. Okay, enough about Unrealized Realities. Quick chat about this Trials for Navigator. I like it. It feels a lot less stat-checky than the previous one, and feels like there's a lot more room for fun clears. At least the first 3 stages seem so. I haven't tried the 4th one yet. As far as this stage goes, the only interesting enemy is the second boss, who will start one-shotting operators if you don't keep crowd controlling her. I use a cycle of Canny Palad's Levitate, Enforcer's Stun, and Laios' Frighten to keep the damage from scaling too high. This gives the boss enough time to do 5 attacks, which I divide between the Levitate and Stun. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for lending me your lucky pops.